Pope Francis, meanwhile, has called for an end to the attacks and violence in Israel. In an address to the crowd at St. Peter's Square, he expressed his solidarity with the victims. The head of the Catholic Church said fighting will not solve any problems.
Let the attacks and weapons cease, please, because it must be understood that terrorism and war bring no solutions, but only the death and suffering of many innocent lives. War is a defeat. Every war is a defeat. Let us pray for peace in Israel and Palestine.
And this was the scene in Istanbul, where thousands of people marched to show their support for Palestinian fighters. Many also waved Palestinian flags and chanted slogans in support of Hamas. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is urging both sides to de-escalate tensions. Erdogan says Turkey will ramp up its diplomatic efforts to achieve calm.
On behalf of Turkey and in light of this morning's events in Israel, we invite all parties to act reasonably and to stay away from impulsive steps that raise tensions.
Rallies were also held in Yemen's capital, Sana'a. People celebrated what's been known or become to be known as al-Aqsa flood military operation by Hamas. And in Kuwait, crowds also marched in support for Palestinians in Gaza. Let's head to the US now, where President Joe Biden has been speaking on the phone with Benjamin Natanyahu. Our State Department correspondent Rosiland Jordan joins us live now from Washington, D.C. Ros, what more do we know about the content of this phone call?
Well, according to a statement just released by the White House, the U.S. President Joe Biden told the Prime Minister Benjamin Natanyahu that the U.S. stands with Israel and that military assistance, which Israel has requested for its defense forces, is on its way to Israel. We don't know specifically what is being sent, but it is worth pointing out that the Pentagon has said in the past day or so that the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is consulting with Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, about what support the defense forces need in order to repel this attack that was launched by Hamas early on Saturday. We also note from the White House statement that the president said that active diplomacy has been conducted and continues to be conducted in order to try to bring this war between Hamas and Israel to a swift conclusion without further loss of life, and certainly to try to help recover those persons who were kidnapped by Hamas and taken to Gaza in the last 24 hours.
Plenty of moving parts to this story. Thank you so much, Rosiland Jordan, live for us there. Let's bring in Shihab Rattansi, who joins us from the UN. The United Nations Security Council will hold an emergency meeting very shortly, Shihab. What are we expecting, if anything, in terms of its power to de-escalate the situation?
Well, we expect that meeting in about an hour and a half's time, just over an hour and a half. It's interesting, the format of the meeting has led to some questions as to what exactly can be achieved from the Security Council in its official capacity, because originally we understand that Malta asked for this to be a private meeting of the UN Security Council. So that is a closed meeting. The public wouldn't be able to see what was going on, but that the affected parties in this crisis, Israel and Palestine, would be able to attend and participate. But then that was changed to closed consultations of the UN Security Council. So that is not a formal meeting of the UN Security Council, and only the current members of the UN Security Council can participate, not the Israeli and Palestinian representatives to the UN. We expect them to be briefed by the UN Special Representative for Middle East Peace, the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Wennesland. Beyond that, we don't have much more information as to what's on the agenda. We do know, however, that the Israeli ambassador to the UN is about to speak to reporters outside the Security Council within the next 10 minutes. We'll be looking at that. We'll also be trying to catch representatives from the various missions on their way into their Security Council meeting.
We've been hearing, particularly from Amnesty International and other international organisations, that the root causes of this violence need to be addressed. I mean, how likely is that going to be the case at this meeting?
Currently, though, we've just had very kind of boilerplate condemnations from certainly the Western nations and Brazil against Hamas's incursion into Israel. The UAE has asked for a resumption or a reinvigoration of what's called the Quartet, that is, the UN, the US, EU, and Russia, which was supposedly overseeing some sort of peace process. But clearly, what's clear is, and what I think a lot of the reporting and the guests you've been talking to have said, is there has been this sense of complacency that this is all just going to keep quiet. I mean, to be honest, actually, there's that pivotal moment at the UN General Assembly right here, just last month, when Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Natanyahu, brandished a map of the new Middle East at the UN General Assembly on which there was no mention of the Palestinians. It was just various Arab states and Israel. And you have to look back then at that pivotal moment at the UN General Assembly as to, well, I think we'll all be looking back at that particular moment. Clearly, as far as Benjamin Netanyahu was concerned, the Palestinian question was over, but clearly Hamas had other ideas.
The historical context must be considered. You're right. Thank you so much, Shihab Rattansi at the United Nations for us. Let's head to London now, where Harry Fawcett is standing by. Harry, a number of European nations have increased their security as a result of this conflict in the past 2 days. How are they trying to reassure their citizens?
That's right. A number of European nations talking about the potential threats to their Jewish citizens, the Jewish communities. So we've heard from the French that they plan to increase protection at schools and synagogues. The police here in London talking about increased patrols and also planning for potential protests in the coming days, presumably looking forward to the kind of Israeli attack on Gaza that we might be expecting in the coming days and any protests against that. Also, in the last few minutes, we've seen a video from the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, in which he talked about this being no moment for equivocation and that he would be unequivocal in blaming Hamas and its supporters for what was taking place inside Israel-Palestine. At the moment, also saying that he'd spoken to the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Natanyahu, and offered Britain's steadfast support and any assistance that Israel might need. That was one of 4 conversations that the Israeli Prime Minister had during the course of the afternoon on Sunday. He also spoke to the German leader, the Ukrainian president, and the Prime Minister of Italy as well. And so there is this continued very strong support for Israel and very strong condemnation of the kind of large-scale civilian killing that was carried out by those Hamas fighters on Saturday, and also the kidnappings of some of those people and the taking them inside Gaza. There are certainly growing reports that many of those people, or at least several of them, may be foreign nationals. There is one missing Britain, for example. So increasing levels of concern. There's also been one line from the United Nations World Food Programme based in Rome. They are calling for the opening and the maintaining of a humanitarian food corridor into Gaza ahead of what everyone is expecting to be this very large-scale ramping up of the Israeli military action.
Really appreciate the update. Harry Fawcett in London for us.